Welcome to our April Bank Council Roundtable. Our topic today is Evolving Leadership in Deal Making. It will be a panel discussion on the achievements of women in transactional practice areas and overcoming bias in the legal profession. My name is Erin Bryan. I am a partner in our Finance and Restructuring Group, and I co-chair our Consumer Financial Services practice. Before we get started, just the usual housekeeping notes. Materials and sign-in are available to download from the Dorsey login and materials email that you should have received by now. We will announce a CLE code for states that require a code, and in the chat, we'll post a link to download materials, the sign-in, and the CLE code. The speakers are not going to have time today to take live questions, but you are welcome to reach out to our panelists or your Dorsey contact after the program. We expect CLE credit in the states listed on this slide. I will now introduce our speakers. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to introduce you to these phenomenal women. My partners, Abby Fang and Betsy Sanders Parker, practice with me in the Finance and Restructuring Group, where they focus their practices on lending transactions. Rachel Benedict is a partner in our Mergers and Acquisitions practice, where she represents both buyers and sellers in a variety of corporate transactions. And Rhona Schmidt is a partner in our Technology Commerce Group, where she negotiates complex commercial contracts and license agreements involving technology and intellectual property rights. You'll hear more from each of them about their practices in just a few minutes. So here's today's agenda. This is what we're going to cover. First, I'm going to provide some background. I'll give some context for today's discussion by sharing some recent data and research regarding women and the law. And I'll explain the relevance of today's discussion so you can hear directly from our panelists on a wide range of topics. They'll discuss their experiences as women in transactional practices and how all of us can work to eliminate bias toward women in the legal profession. I'm going to kick things off with an anecdote. I joined Dorsey as an associate in 2011 following a judicial clerkship. My first week, I was approached by our former colleague, Cassandra Hedrick, who's now executive counsel at Travelers Companies, and I share this story with permission. But at the time, she was a partner in our Finance and Restructuring Group. She was kicking off a major deal and was building her team. She asked me to assist, even though I had no experience yet. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting at a conference table with about half a dozen women partners and senior associates. Although it had not been intentional, she had assembled a core deal team that was all female. Being so new to the firm and to transactional work, I had no idea at the time just how extraordinary and unusual this was. Fast forward to 2023. In the United States, women now make up a majority of law school students and law firm associates. 39% of all lawyers, 27% of all law firm partners, and 23% of all equity partners. This does represent a staggering increase since 2011, but there's clearly still room for improvement. The numbers are also quite alarming when we look further into the racial diversity of these percentages. As of 2023, only 4.86% of law firm partners were women of color. This is an issue which requires urgent action. Today's topic was sparked by a pretty intriguing headline that I had come across a couple of months ago regarding a recent study. In February of this year, Professors George, Gulati, and Yoon published a paper entitled "The Power Five: The Making of Newsworthy Deal Teams." What intrigued me about this study was the author's observation that by some measures, women are making strides in transactional practices at a rate that outpaces their advancement in law firms generally, suggesting that the profession may have turned a corner on the advancement of women within law firms. But that finding was not what they had set out to study. Instead, they were interested in the fact that since 1993, the number of women partners at law firms has more than doubled. They wanted to get behind the numbers and examine two questions. First, have DEI efforts actually succeeded? And second, do women have real power in those firms? The authors worked from the premise that deal leaders typically have the most power in law firms because they tend to bring in the most money and most prestige to the firm. Apologies to our litigation colleagues. By looking at who's leading the deal teams, the authors theorized that they could use this as a proxy for evaluating women's actual power at firms. The team analyzed press releases regarding deals from 2013 to 2023. They reviewed over 10,000 deals. They found that the percentage of deal leadership teams with women rose from 42% in 2013 to 78% in 2023. During that period, women as a percentage of overall team composition rose from 20% to 31%. Although for the entire period, only 1 in 5 team leaders was still a woman. The deal size in terms of dollar value skews lower for women, but the authors found that women are gaining ground on leadership team ladders in tandem with their growth in partnership ranks. They also now outnumber men at the junior level, which the authors believe suggests growth could continue. While this article and our conversation today focus on the advancement of women as a group, for which the data shows promise, the data for women of color as an important subset of that data remains alarming, as does the data for attorneys of color in general. The authors concluded their study with the following observation. To come back to the question, have DEI programs served their purpose? It is quite possible that there has been enough progress on the gender front that it is inevitable that women will soon have a significant amount of power at these firms. But they write that the numbers of attorneys of color look, in a word, dismal. They note, for example, that in their review of deals, the percentages of Black lawyers at the top of the deal are small, and so are the overall numbers of Black partners at law firms. More worrisome is that the percentages go down as one moves from the top slot on a deal to slot 5. In other words, there's no indication of climbing the ladder. This means several things for today's discussion. First, while we can celebrate progress on gender issues, and we should, we cannot rest on our laurels because this data only tells half the story. Second, we must approach racial parity in our profession with the same dedication and urgency that we have given women's advancement. And third, to the extent there are lessons to be learned from the recent efforts to close the gender gap, our organizations should examine whether those lessons can inform DEI efforts intended to close the racial gap in the legal profession. I suspect many in our audience view all of these issues as being of personal importance, and that may be why you're here today. But we should also remember that ABA Model Rule 8.4G makes this a matter of professional responsibility as well. The model rule provides that it is professional misconduct for a lawyer to engage in conduct that the lawyer knows or reasonably should know is harassment or discrimination on the basis of race or sex in conduct related to the practice of law. So it is our intent today to arm you with insights and information that will enable you to be a leader within your organization with respect to ending harassment and discrimination on the basis of sex in the legal profession. Some quick additional background before we get to our panelists. Discrimination stems from bias, which is simply a preference or prejudice for or against something. We all have biases. The key is to work toward recognizing how they show up in our lives so that we can challenge unhelpful biases and act in line with our higher principles. On this slide, we list several bias-tinged beliefs about women in the workplace, and I'll call your attention to the second on this slide. There's a common misperception that the biggest barrier to women's advancement is the so-called glass ceiling, meaning you can rise almost all the way to the top, but not quite get there. However, research has shown that the broken rung on the ladder is the greatest obstacle women face on the path to senior leadership. So how do we repair those broken rungs and missed opportunities? How do we ensure that women at all levels of their career have room for advancement? One way to look at this is to examine why experienced women leave law firms. The most commonly cited reasons include caretaking commitments and stress at work. Our panelists will address both of these in their comments. And with that background, I will now turn to our great panel. Let's meet the speakers. So starting with Rhona Schmidt on the end, if you could tell us about your personal path to your current practice, how you got here, where you started. We'd love to hear from each of you.
Sure. I'm Rhona Schmidt. I'm in the tech commerce group in Minneapolis, and I've been at Dorsey since 2000, but I practiced in Scotland before I emigrated over here in 1998. So I've been practicing since 1995 with a couple of breaks to go back to law school. The type of work I do is it's a transactional practice. It's every type of contractual arrangement for the development of technology through to the commercialization of technology, and then all the different assets that you need to run your business, licensing and leasing of assets. For example, you need to run your business. The deals that I do range from tiny deals where I'm the only counsel on the deal working with business people to massive business process outsourcing multi-billion-dollar deals where I'm working on large teams. And I usually work on 20 to 30 deals at a time. So I'm working with a lot of different teams at the same time. The one feature that applies across my practice is that all the contracts, with a couple of minor exceptions, are relationship contracts. So I'm always trying to establish a contract that will endure for the length of time that the client wants it to endure for. How did I get into my practice? Well, I came from Scotland. I was already a qualified attorney. I'd done some corporate law in Scotland and wanted to practice over here in the corporate group. And I came with a baby. So it was pretty hard to juggle M&A and capital markets and learning all that new stuff with a brand new baby, having just emigrated to the country with zero family support as well. And there was a small group in the corporate group called Technology Commerce that was majority women. And they asked if I would like to come onto the team. And it was the best decision that I think I've ever made in my practice because it just became this family to me. And they trained me up in everything that is what I do today. And they all stuck around for 5-6 years of my practice, and then they all left. So right before I was up for partner, there was nobody left in our group except for me. But fortunately, they trained me to the point where I felt confident I could continue this practice, and Dorsey started bringing in other people to work with me, and we built this team, and we have this fantastic team today. So I feel very fortunate that I was placed in a position where I could learn my practice and take it forward to what it is today.
Betsy Parker, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Betsy Parker. I'm a partner in the finance and restructuring group. I'm a lending attorney here at Dorsey. I've been practicing for 17 years and first started here at Dorsey as a summer associate and decided to build my career here at Dorsey. I started out with an interest actually in bankruptcy, stemming from my experiences both in law school courses and working as a legal clerk for a U.S. bankruptcy trustee. So I entered practice thinking that was what I was going to do. It wasn't too long before I realized that my love of the bankruptcy code and thinking about bankruptcy concepts was not necessarily enough to carry through to a love of bankruptcy practice. It was a lot more animus and fighting and kind of zero-sum game than I really enjoyed. And so fortunately here at Dorsey, we have a structure in our department anyway, where we train our associates to see both sides of the deal early on. So early on, we're training our associates in both the lending transactional side of things and also the bankruptcy side of things. So you can see if you want to go the bankruptcy route, how did we get here? What do these loan documents mean? What do these provisions mean? Or if you want to do the lending side, you're preparing yourself for how do we prepare this for a potential endgame scenario. So it was really an interesting opportunity to get to learn both ways. And as I progressed through my practice and realized bankruptcy was not for me, it was pretty easy for me to pivot into the lending side of things. So that's what I did as kind of a mid-senior level associate. And I've really enjoyed the work that I've been doing during that time, since that time. I now have a practice that's focused on transactional lending work. I represent about 50-50 borrower clients and lender clients, and really enjoy getting to see both sides of the transaction, and that one day you're negotiating one side of an issue, the next day you're negotiating the other. That's okay. The story of how I advanced to my current level of seniority is pretty straightforward. Summer associate, partner, not quite as interesting as the path that maybe some others have. And sprinkled over that time, I did have 3 children as well, which have influenced my life and my practice as well. One was when I was a mid-senior level associate. The second, I was pregnant when I was preparing or making partner at the firm. And the third was when I'd been partner for a few years. So I have kind of gotten to experience the transactional life as a parent in 3 different ways with each of those new additions to my family.
And Abby Fang, can you please tell us about your practice?
Hi, my name is Abby Fang. I'm with Finance and Restructuring Group as well. I'm based in Minneapolis. I joined Dorsey right before the pandemic. Unlike Betsy, I'm not a lifer here. I've been moved around a little bit. I get into banking and finance by accident because the law firm that sponsored my law school back then didn't really provide me with a lot of choices. So I don't really have a great passion for secured lending. I even skipped the study part when I was preparing for my bar exam. But later on, I've worked in New York and Hong Kong in both like financial centers of the world. I think I started to appreciate the logic of finance transactions with different wrappers. Either it's in terms of secured lending or note issuance, or even in the form of a swap. I started to get a hand of my practice. And I think Dorsey provide me with a lot of exposures so that I can represent borrowers in my practice here, even though I have been bank's counsel for a long time. My current practice consists of probably 30% of borrower representation and then 70% of lender representation. And with borrower representation, I got the opportunity to work with big Fortune 500 clients to do their hedge and the swap negotiation, which is quite fun as well. So I guess I'm the example that if you don't know what to do, you can just do whatever life has offered you, and then it might turn out okay.
It's great. Rachel Benedict.
Hi, my name is Rachel Benedict. I'm a partner in our mergers and acquisitions group. I do a variety of corporate transactions, both buy and sell side, often sale of business type scenarios, but also, joint ventures, financings, and other things of that nature. To borrow Abby's term, I'm a Dorsey lifer. I was a summer associate in 2012 and then started at Dorsey after that. And I think it was also, to Abby's point, a bit of a result of circumstance, because coming out of law school at the time I did, right when M&A was starting to get going again after the recession, led to a lot of opportunities for me to experience M&A work and try M&A work. And I was able to really get a lot of repetition on that from the beginning, which I think has really helped my practice. I was also drawn to it because of the team-oriented nature, and I think we can probably all say that about all of our practices. It's a great thing about transactional work, but M&A in particular, I think, has a particular emphasis on the teams, in that you have teams within your client, legal and business teams. You have your internal M&A team. You have your broader specialist teams, and I think working together towards, you know, an ultimate goal, and all the winding paths that might take is really rewarding. I also had children during my time at Dorsey. My first one was 8 years ago, and second one nearly 6 years ago. So I was an associate for both of those times. And I think that something that really helped me was the attitude that my teams and leaders at Dorsey had towards flexibility when I needed to pick up a kid from daycare, or, you know, you get that sick call in the middle of the day and have to run out and take care of things. That really, I think, alleviated a lot of the additional stress that could have come with those situations, knowing that you have a team that supports you and allows you to do great work, but on terms that are, you know, really sustainable.
Great. Well, speaking of teams, you've all worked on teams of different sizes and diversity. And my next question is whether diversity in teams has changed in transactional practice over the years. And in your experience, does the diversity of the deal team make a difference to the outcome or provide a competitive edge? So I'll start with Rhona.
The diversity of teams has definitely changed over the years. My first real deal was in 1996 in Scotland, and I walked into a room of 20 grey suits worn by 20 white men, and I was wearing a cerise pink suit that day, which I immediately regretted because I'm also 6'2" and I was wearing 2-inch heels. So here walks this 6'4" bright pink lady into a room full of 20 men. And I really wish that day that I'd worn something that made me look like a man. I decided at that moment, though, that I wasn't going to become a man, that I was going to succeed as a woman. And that's a very important point, because the first few years, I think this has changed a lot now, but the first, I would say maybe even decade, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, that's how women were expected to succeed. And I was given the advice, in fact, to learn sports so that I could talk like a man, which I actually tried to do. And the first time I tried it in practice, we were talking about some Seattle sports team, and I thought for sure I had it right. And so I talked about it, and I can't remember, I'll still mess up the sports, but I thought it was football, but in fact it was baseball or vice versa. And everyone knew, and I just felt such a fake. And so through those experiences, I've learned, of course, that being authentic is the right approach, and so has the rest of society, which is good. So teams have definitely changed. I find in my practice that I am still negotiating oftentimes against all male teams, and I've been in many even recent transactions where there's very few women. But it's changed in the sense that many of our clients now have big in-house counsel, female teams. And so that gives you a more diverse team. Obviously, if we're talking about gender here, that's what I'm focusing on. So it's better than it was for sure back in the 1990s. And then from does it make a difference having a diverse team? Absolutely. Absolutely makes a difference. And that's because in order to find the creative solution that our clients need, you need to have different people with different experiences. And if you have a diverse team, you're automatically going to have that. You'll have different background experiences that they can bring to the table and offer up these different solutions. So I think it's absolutely essential to have a diverse team in order to get the best solution for your client. And then another reason why it's important to have a diverse team, especially in my practice area, as I mentioned, we do relationship contracts. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to build trust with the other side so that we can enter into a contract that's going to last a very long time. And it's hard to build trust with people that you're very different from. And so when you have a diverse team, there's more of an opportunity to find a commonality between the adverse party and yourself or your partner, depending on how the transaction is set up, and yourself. And you can use your different team members to your advantage from that point of view. I'll give you kind of a reverse diverse story, if you like. I was on a team where it was 3 women on my side and 1 man. And on the other side of the table, it was 1 woman and 3 men. And it was in the education space, which is typically quite aggressive male space. At least that's been my experience. And the male partner at the very large AmLaw, whatever law firm that I won't name, I don't know if he just didn't like me or if I offended him by my presence, but I couldn't open my mouth and he would stick his foot straight in it and immediately cut me off, talk over me, try and impact my credibility. And so, I mean, it was misogynistic and all my female team noticed. Of course, the male guy in the team didn't notice, but we had to figure out how to deal with it. And so the way I dealt with it was I said, look, every time you, the male, and our team speaks, he listens and we actually get things accomplished. Every time I speak, the whole thing falls apart. He just, for whatever reason, is not working. So I coached my male client in how to deal with the male partner on the other side. And that's how we got the deal done. So it was reverse diversity, super frustrating. As a woman, it was probably one of the lowest points in my career, the last 5 years, having to deal with that. But I used it to my advantage in training my client in what to say.
It's a great example. Betsy, what has your experience been with this?
Yeah, thanks. It was really interesting to read that study. I was really excited when Erin sent the link around to us because the headline was very intriguing, and indeed reviewing the statistics of women progressing up the ranks, I thought was very interesting because I really hadn't seen anything like that. A lot of the statistics we see and that I monitor at least are ones that are more just, women at law firms, women partners at law firms, women equity partners at law firms, but to be able to see something broken down specifically on the deal side and also broken down in terms of the leadership roles, I thought was really interesting. I found it very encouraging because what I'm used to seeing is these tiny incremental changes where, every 5 years you get a new study that says, oh, we've made 1 or 2% of progress in the last 5 years. And I'm thinking, holy cow, like I want to see this change for the women who are behind me, for the women who have even gone to law school. I want them to have the equal opportunities to not even have to think about this stuff. And we're not going to be in equal parity until I am retired, and maybe not even then if this continues at this rate. And so that's all kind of a roundabout way to kind of lay the foundation for the question about, do you get better results? To me, you get better results when you have better people. You cannot possibly have the best people, the best team you can put together unless you are drawing from a pool of the best. And I think it's really important that we're not living in a world where there's a large subset of 50% of that pool that feels like there's no future in it for them, that looks ahead of them and doesn't see people that look like them, that are living a life like them, where kind of, as Rhona said, where they have to put on their inauthentic selves and be something that they're not. When those people look ahead and they can't see anyone like themselves, then they start to opt out. And that's when we start to lose the opportunity to have the best teams that we can put together, because half of our talent pool is, potentially disappearing. So to me, it's really important that, the study was really important and encouraging to me to see that people are rising up the ranks. That means that there are people who are seeing themselves in those roles, seeing those opportunities for themselves, and being able to really lean into that. And I think that's really important for being able to put together the best team that you possibly can put together. I can remember when I was a junior to mid-level associate looking ahead of me and saying, gosh, can I do this? Like, I don't actually see anyone ahead of me that's being a woman on this career path that I want to follow, who doesn't have either a stay-at-home spouse or an au pair or a full-time nanny. And while that was great for those people that were ahead of me in their lifestyles, it wasn't what I wanted for myself. So I'm really glad that I was able to find a network of women here at Dorsey and a support from the leadership here as well that was allowed to help me say, hey, you don't have to do it the way that the men do it. You don't have to do it the way that people have gone ahead of you and tried to do it. You don't have to be that one super duper rock star. It's okay to just be a super rock star. Achieve that, aim for that, and we'll be here to support you, and you can do it. And I was really encouraged by these statistics, and I'm looking forward to seeing more progress.
Those are really great insights. And so taking it the next step, not just to outcomes, but talking about the process of a deal. Do you think that diversity of a team can affect the negotiations process as well? And I'll direct this one to Abby and Rachel.
Yeah, this might sound weird because diversity to me, it's like emptiness in thin, which doesn't mean nothing, actually means infinite possibilities. Because when you have a diverse team, you will have different perspectives, different skills, different experiences, like Rhonda just said. For example, a diverse team may have like strong language skills where it can facilitate the communication. And also people from diverse background will be more fluent in like culturally, so that we can avoid a lot of misunderstanding or unintended offenses. And also I think a diverse team can help mitigate risk early on, because people can spot or identify the risk in advance. And also sometimes in legal research, I think diverse team members can brought in a lot of different angles and resources where probably people in one market wouldn't be able to identify. And I actually have an example because I've worked with a lot of Asian borrowers. I think one of those Asian borrowers has been very unique in terms of its execution process. As a big Asian company, sometimes they would require everyone to sign a document first, and then they will go through the rigid process and then sign all the documents, which is quite unusual from North American practice, because usually parties would just sign everything in advance for the lawyers to hold the signature pages in escrow. I think we spotted this issue quite early on and has communicated with lender counsel very early, telling them this would be the closing mechanics, and we will you will have to send us the SIG pages, but you can hold them in escrow, which doesn't really make a lot of difference, which is just for the purpose of helping the borrower to go through their formal execution process, which eventually the deal closed smoothly. But I think our preventative measures definitely helps in that respect.
And I'll answer that on the negotiation side. I think my experience has really tracked with the study of women representation and leadership, because typically it will be the more senior deal team members, one of the partners who takes the lead in negotiating the primary transaction documents. And so there have been many times in my career where the person sitting across from me on the negotiation is a male. There have been fewer times and much more memorable because there are fewer where it's me and another woman who are negotiating those documents. Every negotiation is different and every relationship is different. I will say in the times that it has been negotiations with women, I've had a very positive experience. Again, this is selection bias, but it has been I would say quite collaborative, pragmatic, really focusing on what our clients' primary concerns were and how we can carve together terms that really address what those are. And part of that may also be a recognition that we're each sitting here and we know it's a more unusual situation that there's two women on both sides of the negotiation. So that probably lends an unstated element of collaboration as well, but I think it can and does lead to a different negotiation dynamic and relationship with opposing counsel.
Thank you for that. Well, earlier I mentioned several reasons that experienced women often leave law firm practice, such as caretaking commitments and the level of stress experienced in this practice. So my next question, I'll start with Betsy. Have you found that knowing when or how to set boundaries on your time makes a difference for you personally? Is it challenging to be able to do that in this type of practice? And are there any strategies you've been able to use successfully?
Yeah, I'll start with one of the middle questions. Is it challenging? Absolutely. I spoke with a couple of the panelists up here as we were preparing for this. I was like, oh my gosh, I really actually struggle with setting boundaries. It does not come naturally for me. I am a born people pleaser, and so I want to be able to do everything I can to try to get things done for people and help them out in their time of need. And I think I have a little more leeway in that with my own family. They're not going to fire me, at least I hope they won't. But one thing that I do put into place is that I did make a conscious effort to have two phones. I just have the one cell phone number that I give out. I don't even know my phone number on the second phone, to be honest. But I've got my normal phone, which is my personal phone. And then I have my work phone, on which I have really the only thing I have on there is my work email. And I just had heard from so many people that they would get so stressed out by the constant chime of their work emails coming in, and you never know if it's a work or a personal thing. And that includes the spam that hits all of our mailboxes. And it was just 24/7. I mean, I have a global practice, so I am literally getting emails around the clock, and I wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, what happened today in, Japan and the UK or whatever. So I just couldn't function having that kind of the idea of that constant interference. So one boundary that I've placed is having the two phones. So when I want to check in on the work items, I can. When I want to set the notifications on that one a certain way, if things are really heating up on something, I can. But I can also know if this phone is chiming, it's something that's personal to me and my family. Another thing that I have kind of fallen into doing, I guess, is, as a transactional lawyer, we are available to our clients 24/7. We are always on call. And that's just part of the deal, right? But during the period from about 6 o'clock at night until about 8:30 at night, that's a window that I kind of carve out for my family time, for my kids, to give them some attention as well. So I don't check my emails a lot during that window of time. I know that people know how to get a hold of me. My personal phone number is on every email that I send out. And if there is something that's actually, hot and developing, obviously I'm working on that during that time if I have to. But I also let my clients know if there's an emergency, give me a call, happy to talk through it with you. And then, when 8:30 or so comes, I'm, back on there glued to it for second shift, as I call it, when I'm working in the nighttime until whatever time I need to. But I will give my clients the entire night. I will stay up as long as it takes to get something done. I will wake up as early as it takes to get things done. But I do try to carve out that time where I'm more responsive to my family.
That's so important. Rachel, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yes, agree with Betsy. The evening time, trying to protect that when I'm able is also a practice that I have. I think the other boundary that's important for me is to actually get true vacation time and be able to step back for a period and reset. And I think that it can be pretty hard to get true vacation time unless you set boundaries. My experience has been that is a lot more successful if I am very clear in my communication. And that means communicating with my internal team members as well, so that there is no gap or lapse in support for whatever is going on while I'm gone, that there is someone available who is up to speed and can assist while I'm out if something comes up, so that there isn't an issue with the client. So it really is it really is for me kind of a preparation and communication, and how well I can do that often dictates how successful I am in actually keeping that boundary. I'm a little different than Betsy in that the emails don't bother me so much. I sort of would be more stressed out not knowing. So, for me, I don't mind checking it every now and then. And if I see something come through, I'll make sure it gets the right person. I think that's a little bit different than sitting down and drafting a document for 8 hours on vacation. So I think setting boundaries is a really personal issue. It's understanding what creates stress for you, what are your priorities, what is the value you need in your life. And then it's also hard to do. So, telling myself that this is going to make me a better lawyer, it's going to make me a better team member, and make this a sustainable long-term practice for me, really helps me to do that when it can be hard to set boundaries.
That's a really great lead into the next question. I had mentioned earlier that one of the more unique to women reasons that women leave law firm practice is because of caregiving commitments. That's cited much more frequently by women than men as the reason that they leave. And something somewhat unusual about our panel today and myself is that we have 5 women partners here who are also parents. So my next question I'm going to pose to Betsy, Abby, and Rhona, which is whether transactional practice has posed any unique challenges when it comes to parenting. And if you could share with us how you've navigated that and supported other working parents.
I can lead off on that. Yeah, the transactional practice, at least for myself, it's a mix of really big deals, right? Where you've got, the ones that take a month or 2 months even sometimes, or more to close. It might be a multinational deal or just something local to the US, but you have those. But then you also have the little things that pop up. Someone needs me to review a deposit account control agreement. And by the way, I need it by tomorrow or this afternoon. There's all kinds of little things and then everything in between, right? And so you need to learn how to be able to juggle that all at the same time while, oh yeah, and by the way, your kids have all these different activities they have to get to, or this child is sick for the 4th time this month. And, you thought you were in the office today, but no, you're actually going to be picking them up from daycare unexpectedly and taking them home and, caring for them while they're violently ill. So, you have to balance all those different things. And, it's definitely a challenge. I think one of the things that I try to do is make sure that I do have a strong deal team to back me up so that, when those kinds of things present themselves, there's always someone there that can cover or can step in on the deals and those types of situations. One other thing that I've put a lot of time and effort into at the firm, part of the question I think was about what have you done to help others? I, for the last probably 9 years, have been the leader of the Women Lawyers with Children's group here at Dorsey. We meet 4 times monthly. And it's just a very informal gathering of whoever's available at that time. And I set up the calendar notices 4 times because I know that people are busy and I don't want anyone to have a standing call that prevents them from able to come when they really need that outlet. But we're just a group of people that get together, brown bag lunch if we're in person or just meeting over Zoom. But I personally would not have made it through the pandemic, especially those early months, without that group of people supporting me. My leadership in the group basically stemmed from the fact that everyone senior went in-house or decided that they were not going to practice law anymore. And then there was me. I was like, okay, this is great. I was a senior associate at the time. But, we carried on with the meetings and it was kind of funny because, as new people would have babies and join the group and they're looking to me as if I know everything. It's like, dude, I'm just in this just like you, like I'm faking it till I make it here. But what's really been great about it is that now we have so many partners who are in the group, and we all have had different ways that we've been able to address life's challenges that life brings to us. And so it's a really great opportunity to hear from different perspectives. Some people are in the trial group, some people are in employment, like all these different groups with all these different styles of practices, with all these different ways of parenting, and how we're all figuring out a way to make it work and help other people who are going through the same thing that we are or have been through. So, it's something that's been very fulfilling for me, and I hope has been significant in the lives of others.
And Betsy, you're being very modest about this, but it really was just a huge achievement to get this group really global during the pandemic. So going from having a Minneapolis-based in-person group to expanding it to the entire firm and supporting people wherever they were. I know for me, it was very meaningful, and the firm recognized you for it too, but just a tremendous contribution and something that I think any organization could look at as something to support working parents. Abby, what are your thoughts on this?
I wanted to add to that for the Women Attorney with Children group, because I joined right before the pandemic. I don't know anyone. I went to the office for like a week, and then everyone started to work from home. So I joined the Zoom call with Betsy on the Women Attorney with Kids with Children group. People are talking about a lot of things. It's a really trust group. We talk about all the difficulties we are facing. So it's been really helpful, and thank you for organizing that. And in terms of challenges, I think my family would know I have a closing, because I would be so stressful and I would be so difficult. And I think they now know when not to knock on my door. So I think for me, it's the guilt that I have, that most of the time I have to stay in my study to do things. I had my first kid when I was in law school. So when I was with another law firm, I was a junior associate with a 1-year-old. At some point, at one point, my older son just stopped calling me mom. He calling me auntie instead. That's why I moved in-house. I think it's an example to the statistics. So I moved in-house, and then he is now when we decided to move back, it's because he's reached school age. We thought it might be better for him to get education here. When I interviewed with Dorsey, I think Betsy was the one who's on the interview, one of my interviewers. And when she made her introduction, she mentioned that she had 3 kids. So it's like, you're a partner and you have 3 kids. So basically makes me feel a bit more confident of like going back to private practice, because there are people ahead of you who can do this. So I think it's off topic, but I think I just feel very grateful for all those people who's ahead of us, that in the example here. And then for the challenges that we get with parenting, I think it's mostly because of kids can get sick randomly. A supporting spouse can be definitely helpful, but I'm lucky because my husband stays at home taking care of kids. So basically the duty of care, it's basically lay on his shoulder. But I think communication ahead and active communication can be very important, because when I came back here, I had my second when I was 8 years in practice, and I was on partner track that year. I think a lot of communication with clients, with supervising attorneys, and with my family can be really helpful. And don't shy to just talk to people of your need and of the challenges that you have. I think the firm, at least in Dorsey, I think people are supportive in terms of family issues.
And Rhona, I'd love to hear from you about this as well.
Sure. So I have 4 children. I came to Dorsey with 1. Similar story to Abby. I was doing M&A, capital market, everything that you do as a first year. And I was working really, really long hours as soon as I came here. And my 5 month, he must have been older in 5 months because he crawled and he was not a miraculous baby. So maybe he was 9 months. My 9-month-old baby, when I would come in the door, would turn around and crawl away from me, which was just heartbreaking. And that was at the same time that this group of women partners approached me to do tech licensing, and one of the reasons that I went to it. So I would add to the unique challenges for transactional practice, travel. Travel, when I work on big deals, there was a deal where I was in New York 6 weeks straight. It's just extremely difficult to do that when you've got young children. So how did I navigate it? When I was pregnant with my third child, I was a 5th year associate here. This is back in 2004. And one of the corporate head at the time came in and said, well, how are we going to handle this? What do you need, basically? And I said, well, I'm going to need to be able to work from home. And we didn't have a policy at the time. And he said, well, we like to see the lights on here. And I said, well, I'll leave the lights on, but I'm going to need to be able to work from home. And he, to his credit, said, oh, and as Dorsey does, we formed a committee, because we always do committees for everything. And we did an assessment of who would need a flexible working arrangement policy. And it wasn't just people with children, it was also people with aging parents or siblings that needed help, or whatever your relationship is that needed help. And I was one of the first people who started the working from home. I did 2 or 3 days a week from home since 2005, when I came back after having my third child. So when COVID hit and everyone was in a panic, I said, this is easy. I've been doing it for absolutely ever. And for me, that is one of the ways that I really have been able to manage kids and a practice for 25 years, because that's how long I've been parenting. When you have 4 children, it goes on endlessly, because there's always another one left at home. So what have I done to navigate beyond that? Early on in my career, I was advised to have a calendar where I calendared in my children, just like I calendar in clients, and that if I'm not willing to cancel a client meeting, which of course you never are, you should never cancel your child's meeting either. And that was probably the best advice I ever got. It meant that I always made everything that was of importance to my children, all of their games, not their practices, not the stuff that didn't feel like quality time with them, but all the quality time things I made. Another thing I did was every Sunday I would prep and make all of the meals for the week. And we put our kids on a late schedule. So it's not the 6 to 8:30 schedule that everyone was talking about. It was actually the 7 to 10 schedule. And then our kids, when they were little, they all had 2-3 hour naps in the middle of the day, and they were wired at night. And so I get up really early. I will work from 6 or 7 o'clock, and I will work straight through till 7 o'clock. And then for me, I'm done. And I can't do that second shift. I really think it's amazing that anyone can turn on their computer again at 8:30 at night, because I'm pretty comatose by 8:30 at night. So it didn't work for me. That never has worked for me. I would rather just keep going and then stop. And then, because I prepped all the meals, we'd be able to sit and have a family meal at 8 o'clock at night. And my 4 kids, you never know with your kids if what you're doing is just going to turn out a disaster when they're older, but I now have 3 in their 20s and they're all doing really well. So apparently it's okay to do that. How can we support working parents? I think this is really critical. We have to create teams. And I know there's a lot of tension between keeping the bill small and not having many people working for the client, and having enough people on the team that your lawyers can actually take vacations, see their children, do all the things that make their law career a sustainable long career, which all clients should want, because ultimately, if you don't switch out your lawyer, they have all the business knowledge in their head and is going to be efficient for you in the long run. So I think teams are critical. The way our team works is we get to know each other's clients really well. We do it all off bills, so there's no charge to the client, and we all step in for each other. And that's been a huge, huge improvement in my work-life balance. Never forget your own experiences. There are some people who will forget them, pull up the ladder really quickly. and forget that they went through that with their child. Don't forget, we've all been in the same boat, and talk about it. I think if you talk about it and you can mentor people through those moments, they realize that you did it too. And so there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way to accomplish it. And then finally, seek out management opportunities. It's really important to have a voice at the table that's actually lived these things, so that when you're setting policies for your organization, you have that voice. You can say, well, wait a minute, that's a great policy, except it doesn't work for people who are in ABC boat. So those are 4 suggestions that I have.
That's really great. And I want to highlight the point that you made about flexibility and how you were someone who was using that a little earlier than it became commonplace. But in the materials in one of the earlier slides, I linked to a McKinsey study. And one of the things that they found was that with the increase in remote work opportunities and hybrid environments, they found in their research that more women were expressing interest in reaching more senior levels of their organization. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, is finding that right balance between having the in-person connection for team building and culture, but also understanding that having those flexible options can be really important for women's ability to see themselves advancing in an organization. So I have one final question, which is how corporate law departments can support the advancement of women in their outside counsel teams, and what you've seen that's worked well. We've touched on this a bit, but I'd like to come back to it. Rhona.
Sure. So one of the things that I thought was just really a fabulous approach by a big company, they had a diversity requirement in their outside counsel policy, and it went further than of what you've been seeing in strategic plans, even our own strategic plan at the time. I mean, everyone has that DEI component of the strategic plan, but they had numbers, and they were requiring their outside counsel to actually utilize, in other words, have trained as people of diverse backgrounds performing their work. And then once a year, they have a diversity survey that they send out, and you fill in all the numbers of who you've provided to do the work, and some narrative as well about what you're doing to advance DEI initiatives. And then they score the law firms and rank them. And the firms who did the best actually got more work from them. So that, I mean, that approach, obviously there's pros and cons to that, because there are some areas where there are just more women practicing. There's more women practicing in our firm, for example, in labor and employment, and less women partners in patent. And I think that's fairly common. So if you're doing the L&E work for this big company, you're going to get a better score than if you're doing the patent work and you don't have as many women. So you do have to obviously look at all the different levers that are impacting the numbers. But the key feature for me that was super helpful was it gave me a tool to take to Dorsey to say, look, we have to react to these things, because it's no longer lip service. The clients are actually demanding numbers. Now, there is a word of warning that comes with that, though, and that is that many clients are sincerely committed to moving the needle on diversity, which is fantastic and helps us. But ironically, it's sometimes those same clients that are squeezing the rates at which outside counsel can charge for their work. And so the effect of that is that even though we really want to be able to staff with the diverse candidates, those diverse candidates will end up having a much lower profitability or realization if they're working on that work. And so they don't want to be staffed on it, which really creates a tension between what the organizations trying to do and what the law firm's trying to do as well, because we also can't meet our goals. So in those situations, when you're creating policies, I would encourage looking at the entire policy for how you engage outside counsel. And I know law firms really want to be a part of that conversation. If you're seeing a tension, I mean, there's a natural reaction is, well, then don't measure yourself based on profitability and realization. If all law firms change, that would be great, but that's not how it works. So we have to be part of that conversation in order to be able to have policies that are actually additive to DEI and they don't negate each other.
Great. And we're almost out of time, but Rachel, I would love to hear from you on this before we close things out.
Sure. I'll take just a few observations on more day-to-day impacts. So obviously we are in a client service industry. And so I think just the daily communications expectations from corporate law departments can make a really big difference in women and their ability to make this a long-term career. For example, two things that I've experienced and have been incredibly helpful in me over my time at Dorsey is working with clients who are, you know, flexible when scheduling non-urgent matters. So, you know, if it's a check-in call and it's, you know, the deal's not signing or closing, it's just sort of a, you know, could be scheduled anytime. I've experienced a lot of willingness to do that, you know, during business hours instead of at 5 o'clock when, you know, parents are trying to pick up kids or what have you. And I think another example is goes to the team's point that Rhona made, to the extent that there is enough support within the team that we are able to be nimble and responsive to clients while also allowing for people to be able to manage their personal lives. That makes an incredible difference on a day in and day out basis. And I know that some clients are also really putting this into their policies and guidelines. US Bank, for example, issued guidelines a few years ago that includes commitments and protocols around these very topics, such as, you know, trying to limit communications on non-urgent matters outside of business hours and looking to secondary contacts when the primary contact is unavailable or on vacation. So I think things like that really normalize that practice and help with those boundary settings and areas that make it more sustainable for women long-term.
Well, Rachel, Abby, Betsy, Rhona, thank you each so much for your time, and thank you to our audience for attending. I do have one exciting announcement, which is that our next roundtable on May 29th will be hybrid. So our Zoom attendees, you'll still have an option, but we will also have an in-person attendance option like we did before the pandemic. So that's really exciting. And the topic will be the commercial real estate market considerations for banks and affiliates. So thank you all. Please send your completed sign up or sign in to attendance@dorsey.com. Certificates will be sent to those who return the form. And if you have questions, you are welcome to follow up directly with the presenters or to contact your trusted Dorsey contact. Thank you very much.